Okay, stop what you are doing, because we are diving straight into a fact that, honestly, it fundamentally changes how you view your body and your mind. Did you know that when you lift weights, like actually lift weights, or go for a run, your muscles literally act as an endocrine organ?
Yeah, it's kind of
They
amazing.
release proteins. These things travel through your bloodstream, and, well, they serve as potent fertilizer for your brain.
Exactly. We are talking about real molecular medicine, stuff you can prescribe yourself right now.
It's incredible.
And that is the perfect place to start. This deep dive, think of it as your shortcut, your fast track to understanding these three massive interconnected revolutions happening right now in mental health. We're talking the molecular, the technological, and the systemic.
Right.
By the end of this conversation, you'll know exactly why that traditional model, talk therapy plus pills, while it was foundational, it's rapidly becoming, well, an incomplete picture, often outdated even. We're aiming to give you personalized, holistic insights that, frankly, 99% of people haven't even heard of yet.
Our mission today is basically to synthesize this monumental stack of advanced research, all focused on these holistic frameworks.
Exactly.
We're going from genetics and virtual reality straight into the microbiome, the gut, and even the surprising power of just being in nature.
We're identifying the crucial shifts in modern wellness, trying to figure out what actually works, and importantly, why it works.
Because the current state, it can be deeply frustrating, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. If you've ever felt trapped in that cycle of trial and error,
Yeah.
trying 5 different meds, 3 different therapists, only to get maybe marginal success.
That feeling is universal.
It really is. It's like trying to navigate, I don't know, Mumbai traffic or LA traffic, totally blindfolded,
Yeah.
just hoping you stumble onto the right street.
Yeah, hoping for the best. But we're here looking for the personalized GPS system. So let's start with insight number 1. Biology is, well, it's immensely malleable. We are talking about the molecular medicine of lifestyle. Okay, I want to kick off with exercise. But not in the way your gym teacher maybe told you to. I want to frame it as like a potent, measurable pharmaceutical intervention.
Yes, exactly. Moving the body is a form of internal molecular medicine. It directly changes your brain structure, not just how you feel moment to moment.
Right.
And the core mechanism here, the big word, is neuroplasticity. Exercise is arguably the most powerful, easily accessible trigger for neuroplasticity that we know of.
Okay.
When we talk about how exercise physically remodels the brain, the central player is activating the BDNF pathway.
BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Yeah.
It sounds intimidating, but the concept is amazing. How does it actually work? What's it doing?
Okay, so you can kind of visualize BDNF as like premium-grade fertilizer and the construction crew for your brain cells.
Okay, fertilizer and construction crew. I like that.
Its role is absolutely critical in hippocampal neurogenesis. That just means creating brand new neurons, new brain cells in the hippocampus.
And the hippocampus is key for memory and emotion, right?
Exactly. It's the brain's primary memory and emotional regulation center. BDNF also helps existing neurons survive longer and strengthens the connections between them, the synapses. So by activating BDNF through movement, you are literally making your brain better at adapting, storing memories, regulating fear and mood, all at the cellular level.
Wow. So exercise isn't just managing stress, it's actually increasing the physical hardware capacity, the part of your brain that copes with stress.
Precisely.
But it gets even more fascinating when we talk about inflammation.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be where so much of the biochemistry of mood disorders like depression often starts.
It absolutely does. This brings us to this really fascinating intersection of muscle metabolism and depression. There's solid research showing that your skeletal muscle metabolism actively modulates something called the kynurenine pathway.
Okay, kynurenine pathway. Break that down for us.
Right. So to get why this matters, you need to know about tryptophan. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid. You get it from food. Your body basically uses it for 2 main things: making serotonin your mood regulator or sending it down this kynurenine pathway.
And under what conditions does tryptophan get diverted away from serotonin? When does it go down that other pathway?
Well, when you have high levels of systemic inflammation, maybe from chronic stress, poor diet, illness, the body tends to divert tryptophan much more heavily into the kynurenine pathway.
Okay.
Now, kynurenine itself isn't necessarily the bad guy, But some of the things produced further down that line, some metabolites, they can actually be neurotoxic. They can fuel neuroinflammation.
And neuroinflammation is heavily linked to major depressive disorder, right?
Exactly. So exercise, through these factors released by muscles, it helps kind of intercept this diversion. It promotes the clearance of those potentially harmful kynurenine metabolites, reduces the inflammatory signal, and helps steer tryptophan back towards a healthier balance, hopefully more towards serotonin production.
So it's a direct chemical intervention triggered by muscle activity.
That's right, a chemical intervention.
Okay, so if we've established this pharmaceutical effect, we need a dosage, right? We need to know how much. What does the research actually say about the prescription data? We got to move beyond just saying, oh, go for a walk.
Exactly right. The evidence-based standard protocol, the baseline, is pretty clear. Aim for 150 minutes or more of moderate intensity exercise per week. Think brisk walking, cycling, or 75 minutes plus of vigorous exercise, like running or HIIT.
Okay, that's the baseline.
That's the baseline. But we can, and honestly, we should get much more specific depending on the cognitive function you're actually trying to target.
Okay, give us the specifics. This is where that personalization really starts to kick in.
Let's break down the types of exercise, the modalities. For aerobic exercise, running, sustained cycling, swimming, the evidence links it directly to structural brain change. Specifically, we see about a 1 to 2% increase in hippocampal volume over months of consistent training.
A bigger hippocampus.
Yeah. And that corresponds to roughly a 5 to 10% improvement in executive function, things like planning, attention, organizing your thoughts.
Okay. And what if you're focused more on maximizing that immediate cognitive power, planning, execution? Should you be hitting the weights?
Precisely. Resistance training or strength training seems to show real specificity in cognitive gains, mainly targeting the frontal regions of the brain. We see studies showing a pretty substantial 12 to 18% cognitive improvement, specifically in executive function, from resistance training.
Wow, 12 to 18%. That's significant.
It is. The mechanism there seems linked to increased cerebral blood flow, specific hormonal responses that kind of synergize with BDNF. We even see interesting results from complex dual task training, movements that require coordination and thinking at the same time. Those can drive like an 8 to 14% improvement in attention and processing speed.
So the goal really dictates the movement. Aerobic for building that memory center, resistance training for boosting frontal lobe function, planning. And even if you prefer something quieter, more internal, like mind-body practices, say yoga, you're still triggering structural change.
Absolutely you are. Mind-body practices, things like yoga or Tai Chi, by focusing attention and regulating breath, they demonstrably increase gray matter density. We see increases of 3 to 5% in critical memory and emotional regulation regions.
So even stillness is medicine.
In a way, yes. And interestingly, resistance training and yoga also tend to score really high on compliance. People actually stick with them, maybe because they feel effective and accessible.
Okay, so here's the kicker then. If exercise is basically this free, incredibly effective medicine, and we even have precision dosing data, why isn't it universally prescribed by doctors? Why isn't every doctor giving specific exercise plans?
This points to a massive, honestly, a painful systemic challenge and a huge education gap. The hard data shows that only about 24% of healthcare providers actually give specific, evidence-based exercise instructions to their patients.
Only 24%. That's shockingly low.
It is. And the primary barrier isn't really skepticism about whether it works. It's mostly insufficient training in lifestyle medicine within standard medical curricula.
They just don't learn enough about it.
Pretty much. And here's the really telling part, the clear personal habit correlation. Providers who are physically active themselves, they prescribe exercise 3 times more frequently than providers who aren't active.
Wow. So their own habits influence their practice that much.
It shows a clear link. We desperately need to integrate this kind of training into every medical school curriculum, everywhere, immediately.
It sounds like a crisis of education that's sort of masquerading as a patient compliance issue sometimes.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, moving on. Another huge area of this molecular medicine that's rapidly changing mental health. The gut-brain axis. We're talking about your second mind, right? And maybe, just maybe, your most important one.
The gut-brain axis.
Oh.
Yeah. It's home to what I call the great serotonin revelation. The long-held public belief, is that serotonin is mainly a brain chemical. But the absolutely surprising, well-established fact is that 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut.
95%?
95%. This involves specialized cells in the gut lining called enterochromaffin cells, and also the active, critical participation of your gut microbiome, the bacteria living in there.
Okay, wait, hold on. If 95% of serotonin is in the gut, but we know SSRIs, the antidepressants, work by increasing serotonin levels in the brain, how does that square? Are we misunderstanding something fundamental here?
That's an excellent, really necessary question. So the serotonin produced in the gut primarily acts locally down there. It's crucial for regulating gut motility, how things move through, and for gut signaling. It doesn't easily cross the blood-brain barrier to directly affect your mood up in the brain.
Ah, okay, so it stays in the gut, mostly.
Mostly. The critical connection between the gut and your brain health isn't really about the gut serotonin itself traveling up. It's more about the metabolites produced by the microbiome. Those are the powerful chemical messengers that can influence the brain.
You're talking about things like short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs.
Exactly. SCFAs like butyrate, acetate, and propionate. When your good gut bacteria ferment dietary fiber, the stuff you eat in plants, they produce these molecules.
Okay.
They're not only the main energy source for your colon cells, keeping the gut lining healthy, but they also travel systemically throughout your body. Butyrate, in particular, has really powerful anti-inflammatory effects, and it helps maintain the integrity of the blood-brain barrier.
The barrier that protects the brain.
Right. When that barrier gets leaky, maybe due to inflammation or poor diet, the brain becomes vulnerable to inflammatory signals coming from the body. SCFAs are like the architects, maintaining the structural integrity of your brain's defenses.
So conversely, what we put in,
Mm-hmm.
especially the ultra-processed, hyper-palatable convenience food that's everywhere, that can actually turn our microbiome into like an engine of neuroinflammation.
That's the negative loop, precisely. Eating excessive amounts of ultra-processed foods tends to feed the wrong kinds of bacteria. Specifically, it can lead to an overgrowth of harmful inflammatory bacteria, like certain species of Enterobacteriaceae.
Right.
This fuels systemic inflammation, which, as we talked about with the kynurenine pathway, can lead directly to neuroinflammation and contribute to mood disorders and distress.
Okay, so what's the nutritional prescription then? How do we feed the good guys?
Well, the clinical evidence strongly supports anti-inflammatory dietary patterns. Think the Mediterranean diet, plant-based approaches, diets high in fiber, polyphenols from colorful plants, and healthy fats. These maximize microbial diversity and boost SCFA production.
Makes sense. Fiber feeds the bacteria that make the good stuff.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to probiotics, we need to be a bit careful. It's not as simple as just taking any probiotic pill. The major challenge is strain specificity. While certain strains, particularly some lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, show promise in studies, the effectiveness of any single probiotic is highly dependent on your individual existing gut ecosystem.
The one size doesn't fit all.
Not at all. Personalized nutrition, probably guided by advanced microbiome testing down the line, that's the real future for targeted, effective gut interventions. It's not just popping a generic capsule, it's about understanding your unique internal ecosystem.
Right. Treating your gut like the unique garden it is. Okay, let's synthesize the physical, like exercise, and the internal, like diet, with the practice of mindfulness. This isn't just, fluffy self-help anymore. We have clear structural neuroimaging data showing mindfulness physically changes the brain.
The neuroimaging data is pretty conclusive and, frankly, profound. Long-term meditation practice, specifically protocols like focused attention or open monitoring meditation, induces deep, measurable changes in the brain. Structurally, we actually see increases in the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, and the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC.
Okay, those are the executive centers, right?
Yeah.
The CEO parts of the brain. What does thickening those areas actually do for a person in real life?
Well, the PFC is largely responsible for things like impulse control, planning, decision-making, sustaining attention. The ACC is critical for error detection, conflict monitoring. It's kind of like your brain's internal warning system that something isn't quite right or needs adjustment.
Okay.
So by thickening these areas through practice, you essentially become more adept at managing impulses, making better decisions, and you become less reactive to internal conflict or external stressors. Furthermore, studies on mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, they're linked to another specific and really crucial outcome, amygdala size reduction.
The amygdala, that's the brain's emotional alarm center, the fear center, right?
That's correct. So by consistently practicing mindfulness, you are functionally and even structurally dialing down the oversensitivity of that alarm center. This leads directly to decreased stress and anxiety reactivity.
You're literally shrinking the fear hub.
In a sense, yes. And remember that BDNF we talked about with exercise?
Yeah, the brain fertilizer.
Well, MBSR has also been shown to enhance BDNF production, so it links that internal mental work right back to the same neuroplasticity mechanisms we see with physical movement.
That connection is fascinating. So if we can physically reshape the brain with just internal focus, it seems logical that people are trying to package that solution, right?
Yeah.
Which leads us to the boom in digital therapeutics, all those mindfulness apps in our phones.
Exactly.
What's the clinical verdict? Do they actually work?
The data generally supports small to medium effect sizes for reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety. You often see this represented by something called Cohen's z-values, maybe between 0.2 and 0.5.
Which means they have some effect.
Yes, those are meaningful results, definitely,
Right.
especially for people with mild to moderate symptoms or as an adjunct to other therapies. However, and this is the harsh clinical reality check, user compliance rates vary wildly, like anywhere from a dismal 15% up to maybe 85%.
Wow, that's a huge range. Why the difference?
Well, the correlation often points back not necessarily to the quality of the mindfulness content itself, but to the interface design of the app.
The user experience.
Exactly. How complex is it? How engaging? How annoying are the notifications? These factors fundamentally dictate whether the therapy actually gets used consistently enough to work, regardless of how good the underlying mindfulness protocol might be. Good UX is now effectively a clinical factor.
Design matters for dosage. That's a key takeaway. Okay, so we've established biology is programmable through lifestyle, exercise, diet, mindfulness. Now let's pivot and look outward. If we can program our biology internally, how are external technologies changing what we can measure and, crucially, treat? This brings us to insight two. The future of therapy is increasingly technological.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing mental health care adopt tools that maybe a decade ago felt like science fiction, but they're entirely grounded in solid clinical evidence now. Let's start with a really effective non-invasive technology, virtual reality exposure therapy, or VRET.
Right, VRE. I've seen meta-analyses showing it has pretty huge effect sizes for anxiety disorders, yeah.
Absolutely massive. The key takeaway from the research is that VRET is showing clinical results that are equivalent to traditional in vivo exposure.
In vivo meaning real-life exposure.
Exactly. The traditional method where you actually confront the feared situation in real life, which, as you can imagine, can be paralyzing for patients and often really logistically difficult and sometimes unsafe for therapists to manage.
So what gives VR the edge? What's the advantage over doing it in the real world?
Well, it fundamentally addresses the three main hurdles of traditional exposure therapy: control, engagement, and safety. In VR, the therapist maintains perfect granular control over the virtual environment. They can dial the intensity up or down.
Like controlling the height on a virtual balcony or the number of people in a virtual crowd?
Precisely. They control the proximity of the feared object, the complexity of the social situation, ensuring the exposure is graduated, step by step, and manageable for the patient. This prevents overwhelming panic or people just dropping out of therapy.
Makes sense. More control, less risk of re-traumatizing someone.
Exactly. And this leads to impressive safety profiles. We're seeing up to 95% safety reported in trials for specific phobias, PTSD, social anxiety. It allows the brain to process those fear responses in a safe, repeatable, and very precisely dosage-controlled setting before having to confront the more unpredictable chaos of the real world.
Okay, so VRA looks like the controlled, maybe safer future for a lot of anxiety treatment. Now, we have to pivot to what might be the most revolutionary and maybe controversial high-impact area right now, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy.
Yes. The regulatory landscape here is moving incredibly fast. We've got several compounds, psilocybin from mushrooms, MDMA, even LSD in some research contexts, that have received FDA breakthrough therapy designations.
Which means the FDA sees potential and is fast-tracking the research.
Exactly, pushing them rapidly through clinical trials, mainly targeting conditions that are notoriously hard to treat, like treatment-resistant depression and severe PTSD.
Okay, what's the single most shocking detail about these interventions? What truly proves they represent a potential paradigm shift, setting them apart from, well, pretty much every other psychiatric drug on the market.
For me, it's the sheer durability of the effect, the endurance. We are seeing data still emerging but compelling on single sessions, sometimes maybe 2 sessions, producing effects that potentially last for 6 months, 12 months, even up to 18 months in some studies for these really treatment-resistant conditions.
Nuance from 1 or 2 sessions.
Months. You absolutely have to contrast this with traditional pharmacological approaches like daily SSRIs, which require continuous daily dosing just to manage symptoms day to day.
So it's like the traditional pills are maybe like constantly bailing water out of a leaky boat every single day, whereas psychedelics, potentially, are like calling in a repair crew to actually fix the hole in the hull.
That's actually a really excellent analogy. Traditional drugs manage the symptomology, often very effectively day to day. The proposed mechanism for psychedelics is quite different. It seems to involve inducing this temporary state of profound hyperplasticity in the brain.
Hyperplasticity, like making the brain super adaptable for a short time.
Exactly. A window of greatly increased flexibility. This state seems to temporarily disrupt the rigid, maladaptive thought patterns and cemented neural circuits, the negative narrative loops that often define depression or trauma responses. This disruption, crucially, happens in combination with intensive, guided psychotherapy during and after the experience. And that combination allows the brain's identity networks, memory networks, to rapidly form new, healthier connections. It potentially allows for a fundamental change in the patient's ingrained behaviors and perceptions that can last for months, or maybe even years.
It's a biological reset combined with psychological reprocessing.
That's the idea. It's fascinating and complex, and research is ongoing.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. From these novel therapeutics to more personalized diagnostics, let's talk about precision medicine in mental health. This feels like the much-needed antidote to that frustrating, blindfolded, trial-and-error approach we see so often with antidepressant prescribing.
Yes, this brings us squarely into the realm of pharmacogenomics. The traditional, often devastating reality for patients is trying drug A, then waiting 4, 6, 8 weeks to see if it works, or more often, dealing with side effects. And if that fails, you stop it, maybe have a washout period, then start drug B and repeat the whole process.
It's so much time lost when someone is really suffering.
Exactly. Time lost, hope lost. Pharmacogenomics offers a solution, using genetic testing to help predict how an individual's body will likely handle a specific medication before they even take the first dose.
Okay, but what exactly are we testing for in the genes? What tells you how someone will handle a pill?
Primarily, we're testing for genetic variations or variants in a group of liver enzymes called CYP enzymes, cytochrome P450 enzymes. These enzymes are responsible for metabolizing something like 80% of commonly prescribed medications, including most antidepressants and antipsychotics. Now, if you have a genetic variant that makes you a slow metabolizer for a particular enzyme that processes drug X,
The drug builds up in your system.
right, it stays in your system too long, potentially reaching toxic levels, increasing the risk and severity of side effects. Conversely, if you're an ultra-rapid metabolizer due to a different variant,
The drug gets cleared out too fast to even work.
exactly, it gets chewed up and cleared out too quickly to ever reach therapeutic levels in your bloodstream. It's ineffective.
So this genetic test can basically tell the doctor up front. For this specific patient, drug X is likely to either poison them slowly or do absolutely nothing at the standard dose.
That's a blunt way to put it, but essentially, yes. By analyzing these key CYP enzyme variants, we can get a much better prediction of medication metabolism. The data shows this leads to significantly faster treatment response times because you avoid ineffective drugs and a substantial reduction in adverse effects. It helps optimize the treatment pathway right from the start.
It moves us beyond just diagnosis towards truly personalized treatment optimization.
Precisely.
And it's not just our fixed genetics predicting how we respond to medicine. It's also technology, tracking how we respond to life in real time. Which brings us to wearable technology.
Yes, wearables are becoming a critical tool for monitoring the often invisible aspects of mental health and physiological stress. The core, most validated application right now is monitoring heart rate variability, or HRV.
Okay, HRV.
Yeah.
This isn't just tracking your pulse, your heart rate. It's more subtle than that.
Correct. It's not about how fast your heart is beating overall. It's tracking the tiny millisecond level variations in the time between each heartbeat.
Okay, why does that variation matter?
Because HRV gives us a direct, non-invasive window into the function of your autonomic nervous system. The system that controls all the automatic stuff like breathing, digestion, and crucially, your stress response.
So it's tracking the balance between the fight or flight system,
Yeah.
the sympathetic nervous system, and the rest and digest system, the parasympathetic nervous system.
Exactly. Generally speaking, higher variability, more fluctuation between beats indicates better adaptability, more parasympathetic dominance, better resilience to stress. Lower variability often suggests your sympathetic system is stuck in overdrive. You're under chronic stress, less adaptable.
And we can track this with a watch or a ring now.
Mm-hmm. Real-time HRV monitoring is already being used effectively in biofeedback systems to help people learn to regulate their stress response. But the huge future potential where things get really interesting is the integration of machine learning, ML.
AI analyzing the data stream.
Right. ML algorithms can process these vast continuous streams of HRV data, combined perhaps with sleep patterns from the wearable physical activity levels, and they can learn to recognize subtle, maybe even pre-conscious physiological patterns. The idea is that this could allow the system to potentially predict mental health episodes, maybe a dip into a depressive slump, or a period of heightened anxiety before the user even consciously recognizes it's happening.
Wow, predictive warnings. That shifts intervention from being purely reactive to potentially proactive, or at least much earlier.
That's the promise. Early detection, maybe prompting coping strategies or suggesting reaching out for support.
Okay, before we leave genetics entirely, we should touch on a more advanced concept, one that relies on really massive data sets, polygenic risk scoring, or PRS.
Right, PRS. It's kind of the next evolution beyond looking at single genes like those CYP enzymes. When you're looking at highly complex mental health conditions, think schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, there's almost never a single gene for that disorder. It's much more complex. It's a network effect involving potentially thousands of subtle genetic variations working together.
So PRS analyzes these complex networks. How does it work? Can you give us an analogy?
Okay, think of it like a complex orchestral score for a symphony. No single instrument, no single gene variant is playing the main melody or is solely responsible for the overall piece. But the combined harmony, or maybe disharmony, of all those hundreds or thousands of small instrumental parts played together dictates the overall sound, the overall risk profile for the individual.
So PRS adds up all those tiny genetic influences across the whole genome.
Essentially, yes. It analyzes these networks of thousands of common genetic variants. It calculates a score that estimates an individual's overall genetic susceptibility to certain complex disorders. And critically, beyond just risk, PRS might also potentially help predict treatment response for certain therapies in the future, helping to further personalize therapy selection.
That sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
What are the challenges or limitations right now?
The biggest challenge, a really significant one, is data bias. Most of the large genetic databases used to develop these PRS models are heavily biased towards populations of European descent.
So the scores might not be accurate for people from other backgrounds.
Exactly. Their predictive power can be much lower, sometimes even unreliable or misleading, for individuals from different ethnic backgrounds, African, Asian, Hispanic ancestries, for example. This presents a massive data science and equity hurdle that the field absolutely must overcome to make PRS truly useful and fair for everyone.
Okay, we've journeyed through internal biology, we've looked at these futuristic technologies. Now for Insight 3, let's zoom out. Let's look at the environment we live in and the healthcare system itself. We have to acknowledge that wellness isn't just confined to the four walls of a clinic, right? Or even just our own bodies. Let's start with nature as therapy, this idea of environmental medicine.
Yes, this is an area that's often dismissed as, maybe purely anecdotal or just nice to have.
Oh.
But the scientific data supporting it is actually quite robust now, particularly concerning the intentional practice of forest bathing, or shinrin-yoku as it's known in Japan.
Forest bathing. Okay, what's the actual mechanism here? What is physically happening when you walk through a forest that seems to heal the mind? Is it just the peace and quiet? The psychological effect?
It's partly psychological, sure, the calming effect of nature is real, but there's also a literal chemical exposure happening. A key proposed mechanism is exposure to phytoncides.
Phytoncides, what are those?
They're volatile organic compounds, basically, aromatic molecules, including things called terpene compounds that trees release into the air. They emit them primarily to protect themselves from insects and pathogens from decay.
Okay, so trees release these chemicals.
And when we walk through the forest and inhale this air, we inhale these phytoncides. And studies show they have demonstrable biological effects on us, neuroprotective effects, immune modulating effects.
Wait, so I'm chemically interacting with the trees just by breathing the air around them. Can you break down what those phytoncides are actually doing inside my body, in my blood chemistry?
Yeah, it seems they interact directly with our immune system. Studies, primarily from Japan and Korea, show that phytoncide exposure can lead to an increase in the activity of our natural killer cells, NK cells.
NK cells. Those are important for fighting off viruses and tumors, right?
Exactly, a key part of the innate immune system. So forest air seems to boost this part of our immunity. Simultaneously, we see a really profound modulation of the stress response system. Forest bathing protocols consistently show clear reductions in stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, noradrenaline, norepinephrine in saliva or urine samples.
Lower stress hormones.
Yes. And this is accompanied by measurable signs of robust activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest state we talked about with HRV. Your body literally shifts into a calmer, restorative mode.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's not just the quiet and the pretty trees. It's a measurable physiological chemical dose you're getting from the forest air.
It appears so. It's environmental pharmacology in a way.
Is there a minimum dose required? Like, do I need to spend hours out there?
The evidence seems to suggest a minimum exposure of around 20 to 30 minutes is needed to start seeing these measurable physiological benefits kick in. Longer is often better, but even that short amount seems to make a difference.
20, 30 minutes. That's pretty achievable for most people.
It is. And importantly, we don't necessarily need remote, pristine wilderness, although that's great if you can get it. Factors like specific tree species might matter to some extent, but we really need to focus on urban integration.
Making nature accessible where people actually live.
Exactly. Leveraging the green spaces we do have, local parks, community gardens, tree-lined streets, is essential. But here's a potential caveat, especially in busy urban settings. To really absorb the medicine, you probably need mindfulness enhancement protocols.
I mean,
Meaning you can't just stand in the park scrolling through your phone or stressing about work. You likely need to consciously engage your senses. Notice the sounds, the smells, the textures, to truly build that human-nature connection and trigger the full beneficial physiological effects. You have to be present to receive the dose.
right, tune into the environment. Okay, now let's pivot from the environment outside the clinic to the environment inside the healthcare system itself. Because arguably, the biggest structural change needed for all this holistic care, the exercise, the nutrition, the VR, the nature to become the standard, not the exception, is the widespread adoption of integrated behavioral health systems, often called IBHS.
Yes. This is fundamentally about stopping the outdated practice of treating the mind and the body as completely separate entities, housed in different buildings, seen by different specialists who rarely talk to each other. The core principle of IBHS is multidisciplinary team integration. We're talking about co-locating behavioral health specialists, psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, alongside primary care physicians, maybe even specialists like neurologists or endocrinologists, often within the same physical clinic space.
Okay, what does that actually look like for a patient? And say I go to my regular primary care doctor because I've been having chronic headaches. How does an integrated system help me better than the old siloed way?
Okay, in the old siloed system, your doctor might check for physical causes, maybe prescribe pain meds, and if they suspect stress is a factor, they might give you a referral slip to a psychologist. You then call, find out there's a 2-month waiting list.
Right, the infamous wait list.
Exactly. In an IBHS model, that behavioral health specialist might be physically right there in the clinic, maybe down the hall, or even embedded in the primary care team. The primary doctor can do a quick, warm handoff. You might get same-day access for at least a brief screening or triage with the behavioral health provider. They can immediately assess the potential role of stress, anxiety, maybe sleep issues contributing to your headaches. They can coordinate care directly with your primary physician right then and there.
So no falling through the cracks between appointments.
Precisely. They might initiate an integrated treatment plan immediately, maybe some brief stress reduction techniques, maybe a referral for VRT if there's anxiety, maybe coordinate with the doc on meditation adjustments. It eliminates that massive, costly, and often harmful gap caused by referral delays and lack of communication.
And the data actually shows this model is cost-effective too, doesn't it? It sounds like it might be more expensive up front, maybe.
That's a common misconception, but the evidence points the other way. We see clear data showing IBHS models are highly cost-effective in the medium to long term. Primarily, this comes from dramatically reduced emergency room visits, fewer hospitalizations, and decreased overall healthcare utilization because problems are identified and treated much earlier before they escalate into crises.
Catching things upstream.
Exactly. Plus, having truly integrated digital health records where everyone involved in the patient's care can see the whole picture from their gut health notes to their pharmacogenomic profile to their therapy progress is crucial for making this work seamlessly.
Technology seems like the essential connective tissue here, the thing needed to synchronize all these different providers and data streams.
It absolutely is. Telehealth platforms are already huge, allowing remote consultations, extending the reach of specialists into rural or underserved areas. Integrated health records provide that universal visibility. But the future potential, looking ahead, probably lies in AI-assisted care coordination. Imagine AI algorithms using predictive analytics, drawing from that wearable tech data, maybe PRS scores, patient-reported outcomes to help optimize intervention timing and suggest care pathways across the entire multidisciplinary team.
Like an AI co-pilot for the healthcare team.
Something like that, helping to ensure the right intervention gets to the right patient at the right time.
Okay, this integrated model sounds like the ideal system. It sounds like how healthcare should work. So what's the biggest, most entrenched roadblock? Why isn't this the standard everywhere already?
Yeah, it often comes down to the usual suspects, money and structure. We face two massive structural barriers right now. First, we absolutely must fundamentally adapt to the current reimbursement models in healthcare.
Do insurance pays for things?
Exactly. The traditional fee-for-service payment structure, which is still dominant in many places like the U.S., basically penalizes integrated, coordinated care. It primarily pays for procedures and individual visits. It doesn't adequately reward the time clinicians spend coordinating care with each other, doing preventative screenings, holding team meetings, or developing those multidisciplinary protocols.
So there's a financial disincentive to collaborate.
There often is, unfortunately. The financial structure actively discourages the very communication and teamwork that makes integrated care work. We need payment models that reward outcomes, population health, and collaborative care.
Okay, fixing the payment system is huge. What's the second major barrier?
The second is the massive need for extensive provider training across all disciplines. It's not enough to just put different specialists in the same building. They need to speak the same language, understand each other's roles, and feel competent in basic aspects of holistic care.
So primary care docs need to feel comfortable actually prescribing specific exercise protocols, not just saying exercise more.
Yes. And behavioral health providers need a working understanding of the gut-brain axis, maybe the basics of pharmacogenomics, the evidence for nutritional interventions. We need cross-disciplinary competency development embedded in training and continuing education.
Build those bridges between disciplines.
Exactly. Until both the financial incentives and the educational systems fully adapt to support this integrated, holistic approach, the revolution we're talking about risks remaining confined to specialized clinics or academic centers, rather than becoming the universal standard of care. #, deeper value and hidden bonus Easter egg moment.
All right, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's reward the listeners who stayed with us through all this detail. We've got two, I think, really cool pieces of advanced research to share. Let's start with a concept that connects mindfulness practice directly to your social life. The brain-to-brain connection.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. We've already established that mindfulness changes the individual brain, right? Shrinking the amygdala, thickening the PFC. But some really cutting-edge neuroimaging research is now exploring the concept of interbrain synchrony.
Interbrain synchrony. Okay, what does that mean in plain English? Like mind syncing up?
Kind of, yeah. Think of it maybe like two musicians playing together and intuitively tuning their instruments or timing to match each other. When individuals are communicating effectively or are deeply engaged in a shared task or empathy, their brainwave patterns, which we can measure using EEG, actually start to synchronize. They fire in similar patterns at similar times.
Wow. Our brains literally get on the same wavelength.
It appears so. And what's really interesting is that some advanced research is showing that social interaction skills and empathy seem to improve through sustained mindfulness practice. The suggestion is that meditation might literally make you better at connecting with others, at communicating effectively, at achieving this neural synchrony.
So meditation isn't just helping you manage your own internal state.
It might also be enhancing the shared neural space between people, improving empathy, rapport, and mutual understanding on a fundamental brain level.
That completely reframes mindfulness practice for me. It's not just self-care, it's potentially relational care, social optimization training.
It could be. It's an exciting area of research.
Okay, that's really cool. And the final hidden bonus. Since we've talked a lot about precision timing and dosage, you have a specific powerful data point for circadian light therapy protocols.
I do. Light therapy for mood, especially for seasonal affective disorder or SAD, is a relatively well-known intervention, but people often just buy a lamp and hope for the best.
Right. So what's the specific evidence-based dose and timing that actually triggers the desired biochemical change?
The clinical data is quite precise and remarkably consistent. Using 10,000 lux of bright, typically white light for about 30 minutes, first thing in the morning upon waking.
10,000 lux, 30 minutes in the morning.
That's the clinically effective protocol shown to be effective for treating both SAD and also having benefits for non-seasonal depression. The timing, that morning exposure, is absolutely paramount.
Why morning?
Because that bright morning light signal hits the retina and travels directly to the brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, in the hypothalamus. This helps to strongly reset and anchor your body's internal circadian rhythm, which regulates the sleep-wake cycle, hormone release like cortisol, and crucial neuroendocrine systems involved in mood.
So it's like giving your brain a strong wake up and align signal at the right time.
Exactly. And for listeners who might live in northern climates or places with dark winters, the placement of the light source is also critical. It needs to actually hit the retina effectively. This usually means you need to be fairly close to the light source, maybe within arm's length, not just have it sitting across the room. Face towards it, even if you're doing something else like eating breakfast or reading.
Got it. Proximity matters. That's precision timing and dosing for your brain chemistry using just light.
That's right. Hashtag, recap, and outro. Okay, so that was a lot of information. To try and synthesize this massive deep dive for you, let's just quickly recap those 3 fundamental shifts that are really shaping the future of mental health. First, number 1, mental health is molecular. Remember, exercise is proven medicine. Actively modulating things like BDNF and intercepting that inflammatory kynurenine pathway. And your gut, through those SCFAs produced by your microbiome, dictates a huge amount about systemic inflammation and brain health. Your lifestyle is your primary pharmacy.
Right. Biology isn't fixed destiny.
Exactly. Second, number 2, care is becoming truly personalized. Guesswork is slowly being replaced by objective data. We talked about genetics, CYP enzymes helping predict drug metabolism, polygenic risk scoring, looking at overall risk, and real-time biomarkers from wearables like HRV, helping to optimize treatment selection and maybe even predict episodes before they happen.
Moving beyond one size fits all.
And third, number 3, therapy needs to be integrated. We need to bring technology like VRET for exposure therapy or telehealth for access, and even nature, that phytoncide exposure from forest bathing, into the standard clinical setting. But doing that effectively requires systemic change towards those integrated behavioral health systems we discussed, overcoming those big financial and educational roadblocks.
Integrating mind, body, environment, and technology.
That's the holistic vision.
And it feels like this entire revolution really hinges on moving beyond just observing these powerful correlations.
Yeah.
Seeing that movement is linked to mood or microbes are linked to motivation, and really digging deep into understanding the mechanistic causation, the exact molecular sequence that links a specific intervention to a specific outcome for a specific person.
Yes, that's the scientific frontier.
So the central question, I think, for every listener navigating this new landscape is this: what personalized combination therapy integrating your unique biology, your environment, and the latest technology? What specific combination will unlock your optimal self?
It's definitely no longer about searching for a single silver bullet solution. It's about finding your finely tuned personal synthesis.
Absolutely. Okay, before you go, don't miss our next deep dive. We are tackling something critical: the biggest hidden environmental threats lurking in the modern world.
Oh yeah, this is important.
We're talking about the subtle dangers potentially lurking right there in your home. From the quality of the air you breathe indoors to the cleaning products under your sink, maybe even the materials your home is built from, and how these things can directly impact neurodevelopment, cognitive function, and your emotional health.
It's a really eye-opening exploration that honestly will probably change how you view your living space forever.
It definitely will. You won't want to miss it.